The problem is that if we're not thinking about how do you affect culture, how do you transform an environment, how do you take an environment and transform it, we're not really serious about doing this, and so we don't want to do it. And I remember this issue for me became very real because I remember singing songs years ago. God has given us the city and things like that, and I loved it because I pastored for about a decade and a half, and I really got a feel for what the church can do and ought to do, and I felt like we ought to be engaging, transforming the world. And I remember every day for about 3 months, I had this dog that was down in a neighbor's yard. And I would go out the end of my driveway. And I'm pulling out, and the dog would go right to the mailbox and watch me. And then when I pull out, the dog would start to kind of like bark, as though it was kind of territorially protecting its property. And I'd go by the house, and the dog would come running up after me. And the dog would go, ruh, 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 and I always the dog irritated me, so I would kind of like watch the dog come up, and as soon as the dog got like close enough to try to catch the car, I'd always take off and just leave it in the dust. And I thought, why don't people restrain their animals? I mean, it's just this dog thinks it's more than it really is, and so every day it was like a psychological contest with that dog. I'd sit there, kind of wait till the dog would look at me, I look at the dog, and all right, we'd take off, and it'd start barking, and I'd look at him, and I'd wait till he kind of like almost caught up to the car, and he'd almost catch up to the car that he was kind of like trying to take on, and I, boom, leave him in the dust. One morning, for some reason, I'm wrestling with the church, the world, how do we engage culture? And the thought comes to me, what would happen if the dog actually got the car? Rather than feeling that sense of smug satisfaction having driven me out of the neighborhood, what if it got the car? That morning, I waited. I revved up the car, I looked, there was the dog at the driveway, checking me out. He had his routine, I had mine. I come by, the dog starts barking at me, I speed up, comes up, and then I slowed down and stopped the car. And the dog comes up to the car, it's completely confused. I'm telling you. It walked up to the window like this and looked at me. And I was as perplexed as the dog. This was a serious doggy psychological moment. And I looked, and it looked at me like, what happened? We had a great thing going here. I'd bark about you. You would acknowledge me with a shrug and take off. Everything was working fine. Now you stop the car. What am I supposed to do with it? It sniffed my tires. And then in a very dejected kind of way, it dropped its head and went back to the yard. No sense of triumph. The next morning, no doggy in the driveway. And I thought to myself, isn't this exactly what would happen if God gave us what we asked for? If God was to suddenly turn over the enterprise of a city to you and said, take it, we don't know what we're doing, it would take all the pizzazz out of it. Because instead of barking about the world and decadence and darkness and the devil and the triumphs of the church and the breakthrough here and what God did over there, we'd actually have to do something. And we don't really think that way. We don't know how to do it.